Tarks Gauntlet.
Parasite Eve first launched in Japan in March of 1998, and in North America in September of the same year. Made by Squaresoft and produced by Hironobu Sakaguchi of Final Fantasy fame, this 2-disc action RPG was, and still is, a very unique kind of game. I personally consider Parasite Eve a must-play Christmas game. For those who have played it, you might understand when I refer to this as Die Hard, the survival horror JRPG. Yes, you heard that right. If you haven't played this game before, you'll understand this statement by the end. The game starts on Christmas Eve. Although you can change your character's first name, her canon name is Aya Brea. NYPD newbie Aya Brea is on a blind date with the world's biggest beta male, attending an opera with great seats provided by her date's wealthy father. Shortly after you take your seats, the play begins and we get one of our first, and what I still consider one of the most memorable FMV sequences on the PlayStation 1, and definitely one of the coolest in the game. Eve, the star of the opera, begins singing, and immediately you can tell this game is showing its age, with her elasticy mouth gaping open in the strangest elliptical formations. The voiceovers for her vocals are all built-in synthesizers and create a very unnatural sound. A sound you'll be hearing quite a few times throughout the game, but one I find rather characteristic and charmingly outdated. Eve and Aya share a quick, knowing glance when suddenly the male lead of the opera bursts into flames. Assuming this is pyrotechnics and special effects, much of the audience sits and looks on in wonder, until the flames spread to them. Still convinced it's special effects, the audience takes a while to react, and they all spontaneously combust. At least, the game says they all do. Aya is talked about several times as being the only survivor, but we clearly see in the cutscene right after this that her beta male date lived just long enough to be knocked out by Aya, who simply had enough of his beta male bullshit. Aya may be a rookie cop, but she's a serious woman with no patience for petty shit. When I played this game as a kid, this scene blew me away, and still to this day I think it's badass. The way the music counterpoints the violence on screen is a solid IRL pelvic thrust and drag, balls to the wall introduction to a video game. Following this, Aya pursues Eve underground where she begins to have visions of a young kid in a hospital gown. Her next few encounters with Eve, she is told that she is special, and that her mitochondria is on the verge of an evolutionary breakthrough. But why Aya? What makes her so special, and how was she immune to the combustion everybody else in the opera house experienced simply by being in close proximity to Eve? Who is Eve besides a low-poly monster girl? All these questions and more are tackled over the 8-hour runtime of the game as you battle hideous mutated animals, reanimated dinosaurs that completely break suspension of disbelief, and continue your investigatory work as an NYPD rookie on Christmas and the surrounding days, even after events get so bad that the city is completely evacuated. As far as JRPGs go, having a New York cop on Christmas battle horror-inspired creatures turned monster through mutagenic means is already a very unique premise. But what truly sets Parasite Eve apart is its combat. You see, Squaresoft were big dogs at the time, and they wanted to flaunt that. From the now terribly outdated look of the rotating 3D world map of New York, to the FMVs that show how much difference it makes when you don't sculpt the more nuanced features of the human face, to the back of the game case that boasts, battle mutant monsters in real-time polygonal combat. It's really hard to believe that at one point, polygonal was a buzzword used to sell video games to people, but certainly the proof is right here in the pudding. Squaresoft wanted people to know they had the biggest dicks on the PlayStation, and they were intent on finding ways to consensually wave it in your face at every opportunity. This of course led to the real-time polygonal combat found here in Parasite Eve. Battles don't quite happen randomly, but there are no particular way to avoid them. Simply walking onto a screen will trigger the battle that's set to happen there. Although if you have done this battle once already, they seem to have a lower chance of actually triggering upon returning. Enemies spawn when battle starts, and battles take place in the actual environment, rather than a separate stage like most RPGs were doing at the time. During battle, you move around at your heart's content just as the enemies do, but you cannot perform actions until your AT meter up here is full. The AT meter is little more than a timer. Think of it as similar to Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. Once your AT is charged, there's a number of things you can do. Pushing triangle will open a menu where you can use items, change equipped gear, or use PE. PE is kind of like mana in this game. As you progress, you will learn new abilities that require PE. From the different levels of healing and curing, to haste, to special energy attacks, the game gives you a lot to work with, but if you use all of your PE, you will be temporarily stunned. Of course, when your AT is filled, you can also attack. Although you do have a club for melee attacks, your primary weapon will be a gun. Guns have their own stat systems and special abilities, and can be modified using tools to be made even stronger. When you choose to attack, a green polygonal grid will appear around you. This shows the range of your weapon. Hitting an enemy outside of this grid will have a high chance of missing or will severely reduce your damage. Depending on your weapon, you can fire a different amount of times. You can pump all of your shots into one enemy or mix and match them as you see fit. It's worth noting here that ammo is limited in this game, but that limit is not very low. By the time I completed the game, I had hundreds more bullets than I needed, although some guns, such as rocket launchers, will take its own unique type of ammo that are far more difficult to keep stocked. Aya can also equip armor and bulletproof vests to up her defense. Unfortunately, these do not appear on her character model. Strangely enough, neither does the gun you equip, at least not outside of battle. Although it appears she has a full set of animations with every weapon in her hand, as soon as you leave battle, her character model defaults back to the basic police issue pistol. This of course doesn't bother me at all, but it's a strange detail to note. Perhaps only half as strange as her body being 70% legs, but strange nonetheless. As you battle, you gain XP to level up with. On top of this, you are also rewarded BP. BP stands for bonus points and can be used to up the defense efficacy of your armor, the damage output of your pistol, reduce the time it takes to charge your AT meter, or boost your inventory space. Much like other survival horror games of the time, the inventory space is really hurting. With just the keys and passes you need for the stages alone, you'll find you're overburdening your character and needing to throw away perfectly good weapons and curatives to keep picking up new keys to progress. Again, this is a minor annoyance and one you can work around by boosting your inventory space limit. But using your bonus points on AT or upping the damage of a gun to make it OP seems like a much better way to use your bonus points to me. This is a battle system I really enjoy in concept and even in execution, but one thing hampers the experience down terribly throughout the game. It's just too damn easy. Being able to move freely feels great, but the enemies seem to move too slowly and too predictably. The enemy attacks are clearly telegraphed, but to an extent that it's almost difficult to get hit by them. This means combat boils down to dodging until your AT is full, firing a couple shots, and repeating ad nauseum, usually coming out of battle with hardly a scratch. This is true straight up until the final stages of the game. It's not a fault of the battle system though, it's a fault of the enemies they populated the main campaign with. Anybody who's played through the Chrysler Building in the post-game content will tell you just how hard battle can actually be. All things considered, perhaps this doesn't deserve the survival horror credit I gave it earlier, as surviving is made fairly easy due to an overabundance of ammo and easy enemies. Item management is rough, sure, but that's not quite enough to earn the credit, so we'll stick to just calling this a horror from now on. Throughout the game, Parasite Eve builds a small yet strong supporting cast of characters. From the over-assertive and condescending scientist known as Hans Clamp, who if we follow die-hard logic you know is automatically the bad guy, to Kunihiko Maeda, a young Japanese scientist residing in America for studies, to the hardened veteran detective Daniel Bodalis and his son Ben Dallas, as well as a few more. Much to my surprise and pleasure, playing this game through as an adult, I realized just how mature and grounded many of these characters were, and how much development they actually undergo in the short runtime of the game. Detective Dallas, for instance, has a very heavy subplot involving his home life, his marital problems, and his everyday issues that stem from being a responsible and loving father while working his detective position. The Japanese scientist Maeda only appears halfway through the game, but he too shows a fair deal of character development. An easy example of this can be seen early game in his steadfast belief that nothing is to be believed without adequate evidence. As the game progresses, Maeda will begin filling your inventory with cultural good luck charms, and even concede by the end that, even though something has yet to be proven scientifically, there can be a purpose and comfort in having belief in it. As a game, I do believe most of it still holds up, both visually thanks mostly to its great pre-rendered backgrounds, and mechanically. It definitely shows its age in the sound design and even in the FMVs to some regard, but even these have a bit of a campy charm. While I do think the faces are a bit uncanny valley, the scenes depicting transformations are still quite stunning. I do have 3 complaints I do absolutely wish were handled differently, however. The first being the battle music. There is a lot of great themes in this game and I do generally enjoy the music, but I'm not so sure the battle music is one of the great themes. This track feels average at best to me and used in entirely the wrong kind of place. This theme seems more fitting to menu music than anything action-oriented, and it's used more than any other track in the game. But even I can concede that perhaps this odd choice just lends to the strange yet alluring tonality of the Parasite Eve universe. The second complaint is the lack of D-pad support. The D-pad does absolutely nothing in this game, and I personally hate navigating menus with analog sticks, but analog sticks were the new hot thing at the time, so of course they would force the focus onto them. And my third and final big complaint is in the end chapter of the game. The final chapter is 4 boss battles in a row and a chase sequence. The bosses themselves aren't a problem because, as I stated before, the game is absurdly easy. Fun, but absurdly easy. However, once these bosses are defeated, you must escape the ship the final battle took place on. If you are so much as touched by the enemy who's pursuing you, it's game over. There is nowhere to save after the boss battles are over, so once you hit game over, it's back to the start of the chapter. What makes this bad to me is that you have to escape through an area you've never seen before. Some directions lead to dead ends, which means going down them is inevitably a game over. Discovering which one is a dead end is no more than trial and error and comes off as cheap artificial difficulty. Given the game is also played on fixed camera angles, oftentimes moving from one screen to another will reverse your perspective, and you could end up walking right back the way you came when the new screen loads, landing you in yet another game over. Every time you get game over, it means dealing with unskippable cutscenes, and it's all just more annoying than necessary. But this is just a single black mark in an otherwise great but easy horror JRPG. Parasite Eve, as I see it, is that game most commonly referred to as, oh yeah, that game, I remember that game, that was a good game, they should make more games like that. It's a game that left a lasting memory in most of us who played it due to its unique set pieces like the opera house in the intro, or the boss battle aboard a chariot being pulled through New York by 2 flaming horses. Despite that, and despite it being based on a well-received novel, despite it being released at the height of Japanese horror in cinema, and despite it landing 2 more games in its series, it never managed to make much of a cultural impact. If you want a Christmas game to play that's a little off the beaten path, or you just want something unique that bears the telltale signs of being a product of its time, this short cinematic romp I refer to as Die Hard, the horror JRPG, might be just what you're looking for. While I personally would have liked more of a challenge from the main campaign, I think this was a great game and a great first attempt at something like this, and a wonderfully unique experience that should be felt and not forgotten. And that's all I have to say on Parasite Eve. If you guys like this video, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe. Links to socials are in the description. And if time is permitting and there's much interest, I might cover the second game here by the end of the year. So let me know what you guys think, and as always, thanks for watching. But why Aya? What makes her so